Hello and welcome to the Review Summer School Edition, where we go over everything entertainment news. It is currently July 13th. So much has happened in these past couple days, but first, let's introduce our favorite co-host. We know him, we love him, the editor of this show and the host of Takes on the Yard, Mr. Menra, Mapfumo. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Hi, everybody. I'm back. Told you I'll be
He's
back.
Um, let's start with the most important news, I think, of the day. The actors, SAG-AFTRA, decided to go on strike this morning, July 13th, 2023, after their contract with the major studios expired last night. Cue Cheryl Lee Ralph tweeting at 11:20 p.m., the contract has expired, period. As if we are about to enter the apocalypse. Um, it's almost a little bit apocalyptic in a way, if you really want to talk about it, especially for Hollywood in general and the city of LA, who a lot of people depend on entertainment business, not necessarily entertainers themselves, not necessarily writers themselves, but the fact that writers and artists and actors are in the buildings and needing lunch and needing to be cleaned up after, things of that nature. This is definitely going to be a very, very interesting 2 months, so let's go through it all, starting with yesterday. Okay, so the contract expired yesterday, and the AMPTP, the mouthful, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is, I guess, I don't know how to explain it other than it's a group of the major studios, a group of representatives from the major studios. And they come together every couple years, every couple months to discuss things like the contracts with workers' unions, things like, how they govern themselves, how they govern their workers. They basically come together to set the precedence of what entertainment will look like for the next couple months and for the next couple years. Bless you.
I'm sorry.
They basically decide how entertainment looks and how it works, essentially, for lack of a better explanation. So, SAG-AFTRA announced a couple days ago, I'm going to say either Monday or Tuesday, that they would sit back down at the table and go back through negotiations yesterday on Wednesday, but that the contract would not be extended. So the contract was extended about a month ago to keep actors out of a strike. And the whole idea is, as long as we can keep actors out of a strike, we can focus on the effects of the writer's strike, which has also been bad for actors because of the writer's strike. A lot of production has been shut down. Actors in solidarity aren't showing up to work. The actors who can afford to not show up to work have not been showing up to work. A lot of productions have closed down. Major studios started letting go of a lot of non-creative staff. So like Sony put out last week that they fired about 75% of what they consider non-essential personnel. So accountants, your maintenance, your plumbers, your janitorial staff, things of that nature. Let's start there before we even get into how everyone has responded. What does this mean for students, especially like us, who are working, students more like you who are graduating and looking to join this very workforce in the not too distant future?
Well, I think it definitely creates more anxiety that was previously there. I'll bring up something like the student loan forgiveness, how that was shut down by the Supreme Court. And now students who are looking to go into the film industry and media industry immediately out of college, there's a chance that that might not happen. And then on top of that, there is no way for a consistent source of income to come when you can't work somewhere and use your film degree at another place where you're not at a film studio and stuff and things of that nature. So it definitely creates more anxiety that was already there, and it's stressful, honestly.
Honestly, I agree with your sentiment. So, despite all the news and the drama surrounding Twitter, it still remains one of the quickest ways to get credible news if you're looking in the right places. A lot of the major news outlets, entertainment news outlets, had been tweeting and posting about this incoming actors strike before they even published articles, which I think really speaks to the abruptness of the actor strike. Actors have been preparing. A lot of actors have already been on strike with writers, mostly because a lot of actors also double as writers. So they're in both SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild of America. So, we're literally looking at people hitting hard. What stood out to me was the fact that a lot of our alumni, a lot of the people that we went to school with, had been tweeting and retweeting, "Why did I choose this industry?" Um, which I think we kind of see it differently because we are protected by the fact that we are in school, so it doesn't really matter if writers go on strike because we write ourselves, and then we produce ourselves and then we act ourselves. Um, but it didn't dawn on me for those of us who have already graduated and who are trying to actively work and do that a lot of the times this does matter. I want to get into what the AMPTP had to say about the actor strike. And don't mind my phone. This is really tiny letters, and it was a lot. So their response to the SAG-AFTRA's press conference that was released this morning by their president, Fran Drescher, who you guys might remember from The Nanny. A strike is certainly not the outcome we hope for, as studios cannot operate with the performers that bring our TV shows and films to life. The union has regrettably chosen a path that will lead to financial hardships for countless of thousands of people who depend on the industry.
I'm gonna go ahead and say something. I'm, it's a PR response. However, I don't respect the response. Um, you have the opportunity to make sure that these thousands of people that you're talking about that depend on the industry, you have the opportunity to make sure they don't go homeless and they don't end up broke. Yet you don't want to pay these people. And these are people who have produced hours and hours upon hours of content for you and made millions of millions and millions of dollars for you. And so you can't slide them a little piece of change. And you have the nerve to talk about hardship. You're the one creating the hardship.
It's very true. Speaking of broke and homeless, news broke on 7-Eleven via Deadline that some major studio representatives spoke with not only the AMTP, but other major producers, other major studio executives, and the general consensus among them was that they had no plan to sit down with the writers, that they were actively trying to prevent the actor strike, but they didn't have a plan to sit down with the writers until the fall. And the plan for them was apparently to let the writers go broke until they needed to come to the table in the fall. It's currently July, so that would be August, September. We're talking about another 2 months. The writers have already been on strike for 2 months. We've seen a lot of writers come out and talk about the fact that they've moved back in with their parents, or the fact that they're, starting to live together to be able to afford rent, or that their spouses are now the sole income in their household, which is not very practical if you live in Los Angeles, like most of them do. We've heard a lot of them point out sort of the guidelines of their union and the guidelines of the studios, that this feels like a threat, and under their contract that they're trying to review, and the contract that parts of contract that remain in place even when they're on strike, is that they cannot be threatened by these studios, and that's what this feels like. The ANTP themselves, AMPTP, Jesus, themselves commented and sort of recalled the article saying anonymous people are not speaking on behalf of the AMPTP member companies, um, which a lot of writers pointed out that this feels like it was discussed and it was said that they wouldn't meet with writers, and their resistance to meeting with writers, despite what they've said and what they've announced, means that they do in fact plan on not reconvening on negotiation with writers in the fall. And a lot of actors came out and said the way that the conversations at the end of their contract went means that they had no plan on negotiating with neither actors nor writers.
Can I say something real quick?
You can.
I'll go back to the union speaking about this sounding like a threat. I believe it very much is a threat, and I'm also looking at the relationship between the union and the AMPTP, because we look at streaming services. There's already been a bunch of content created for months to come when it comes to streaming services. And I feel like this was the plan for these big companies the whole time. We get the writers and the actors to do all of this content for us, and we have content to put out once a month or whatever, anything like that. And then we don't have to pay them should the time arise. So here we are where the time has arisen and we don't have to pay them. We have enough content to just put out to the public. Now, when that content runs out, then I think that's when they'll start negotiating. But then you have to look at it from a unionist point of view, where it's like, hey, do I want to go back and work for you? Are you going to do the same thing to me that you just did before? And it puts them in a position to make a hard decision. Sorry.
It does. Fran Drescher sort of talked about that in the SAG-AFTRA press conference this morning, where she she says that you cannot change the model of how our jobs are produced and our jobs are created, and then decide that we should not be compensated for how you've changed the rules of the game, which I think is totally fair. It reminds me of the teacher strike not too long ago. The teachers went on strike when I was in high school. It actually took away almost a month of what would be my last year of high school because of the pandemic. And then the teachers went on strike not too long ago. I believe last school year, they went on strike in the fall against the superintendent for the very same reasons. And I think the most important part of this conversation is remembering that we're not necessarily talking about, the Tom Cruises or the Leonardo DiCaprios, even though they are in fact, actors and writers and part of these unions, but we're talking about these people who are interacting with them on screen who go nameless. We're talking about people who show up, do a J job, DoorDash, and then show up to set at night because they want to act and that's their true passion. It reminds me, so I read an article yesterday while I was taking notes for this, and it was an article that I don't know who did, I don't remember who actually, who the article came from. It was a screen cap of someone interviewing the cast of Orange is the New Black, which, if we can remember, Orange is the New Black is what put Netflix truly on the top of streaming, and what made Netflix, the premier streaming model, and what made everybody want to have a streaming platform like we do now. If it wasn't for Netflix, putting out Orange is the New Black, Hulu probably would not be what it is. We probably would not have Disney Plus. Like, streaming just wouldn't be as necessary, you know? And one of the actors mentioned that for one of the seasons, he actually paid more to be on the show than he received from actually making the show, because he was considered a local cast hire, but they moved the location of that next season. So that next season, he was flying himself to location, paying for his own hotels, paying for his own transportation, to be on the show, because they wanted his character to remain, but considering that he was a local hire, it means that he lived in that location when they were well aware that he did not live in that location. And he said that in hindsight, it was a very bad idea, but I wanted to be a part of the show, and we were just coming off of some Emmy wins. It was important to me to remain.
I'm gonna say this. For any actors or aspiring actors that are watching, I have so much respect for you all. The links you all go through to get to the top of your careers. It's very like, yeah. I don't even have the words, but I respect y'all, and I hear y'all, I see y'all, and I wish nothing but the best for you all. Sorry, I just had to get that out there.
I think the whole situation is tough as is, which leads me to what the actors can and cannot do now that they're on strike. So, the cast of Oppenheimer actually walked out of their London premiere today because the strike was announced. Matt Damon said he sat the cast down last night, and they decided that the plan was, as soon as the strike is announced, if the strike is announced, and as soon as it's announced, we will be leaving. We will officially be on strike, and we will be supportive. We will be going home. So actors cannot do any promotional activities in any way. That means they cannot attend premieres, they cannot do press junkets, they cannot hold interviews based off of movies, television, things that are coming out in the near future, which now kills Barbieheimer, if you really think about it, which now leaves Barbieheimer promotion solely to the consumers. I'm in my little Barbie fit today, if you guys can tell. Unfortunately, I will not be with the model of seeing Oppenheimer first. I will be seeing Barbie first. Hate to break it to the public. I'm sorry. I have to. They cannot promote themselves in any way, actually, which is what I learned this morning, which I found surprising. They cannot audition for anything in the future. They cannot even record themselves. They cannot do self-tapes. And they cannot submit, if they do in fact record a self-tape or record a dance video or something or the other while they're on a strike, they cannot add it to their portfolio. They cannot use it in an audition, even after the strike is concluded. They cannot sing or dance. If someone is there, honestly, like, when you think about it and you think about the fact that this is really like their craft and their lifestyle and like the dedication that a lot of these people put into it, like legitimately, these people cannot be happy. Like, they cannot do the thing that they want to do most. There's a couple other things. There's a lot of things they can't do, and it's so sad. The other thing they cannot do, which also it falls under the umbrella of they cannot promote themselves, they cannot talk about nominations of the shows, because nominations of the shows are submitted through major studios. They can't discuss it, which is why I feel like the Emmys sort of were like, let's hurry up and do this now. Let's announce these things now. Because now the actors got a chance to talk about it and thank people and, be excited about the fact that there's a lot of first-time nominees in this Emmy Award season. There's also a lot of questionable things that we'll talk about. But yes.
also wanted to mention how, well, you talked about it earlier about how non-essential staff were being fired from their jobs, but yeah, I wanted to mention that it's a chain. You know,
Absolutely.
you don't, these actors go on strike, these writers go on strike, you're hurting somebody else, and then in turn somebody else is being hurt. After that, somebody else is being hurt. Like you said, with press tours, a lot of journalists who cover press tours, they make their money off of promotional events and everything like that. However, they won't be able to do it because the actors are now on strike. And so it begs the question, are these non-essential people, are they upset with the studios as well, or are they upset with the ones that are on strike? I was just curious about that. I know you don't have the answer for it, but
I think it
it,
really
it's
depends on the
it's a valid
person.
question. Yeah.
I think the answer depends on the person, but I think collectively we should all agree that striking is a last resort. Um, and I honestly, being black and being the daughter of a teacher, um, I find it interesting that strike specifically has like a different meaning and connotation. Like strike specifically regards to like workers' unions, when truthfully strike is just a different word for protest.
Mm.
So what it is a protest of the fact that you are making millions of dollars based off of streaming, and then giving writers and actors who are not a part of that pre-production process um, pennies essentially for residuals. I remember vividly, like I was in middle school, like right when Oprah started that Love Is series. It was a couple, and the wife was a 90s video vixen. And she was like, occasionally people talk about like the fact that I can't contribute, but I contribute because, my son really likes to get chicken nuggets from McDonald's when we're like on the way home from his dad's office. And I get a residual check every now and again when people watch my videos. And usually it's $5 for
Mm.
like the 100 videos that I've done with artists. And that gets my son his chicken nuggets. And it didn't occur to me when I was 12, but it it popped up in my memory when the writers went on strike in May. And I was just like, if you have done, let's say like that was actually 100 videos that she's done, whether it was less or more. And at the end of the month, based solely on YouTube, she gets $500 for the fact that people are rewatching 90s hip hop videos. What does that mean? What does that translate to for, let's say, 1.2 million people tuning in to watch Secret Invasion on Disney Plus? Like, what does that translate to for writers and for actors? Um, and let's just say that Samuel L. Jackson is left out of that equation because he is a large part of Marvel. So he probably would have made more money off the top than anybody else involved, and probably also would have had some residuals in his contract. Probably still has residuals in his contract from the Invision series. Like, what does that look for say, like Talos? Or even Emilia Clarke, who's a newcomer to Marvel, even though she herself has made a name for herself in acting. And then what does that look like for the rest of these like army men and military men that the episode are all filled with? Like, what are they making, and what is the breakdown of their residuals, if any? Because I remember when streaming really became a thing in the pandemic, a large response was, why are studios the only people making residuals off of these things, despite actors, writers, producers, showrunners working through a global pandemic that claimed the lives of millions of people?
Well, here's what I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna take it over to sports for a second. When unions for, say, the MLB, the NBA, or the NFL, they sign CBA contracts with those leagues, with the NBA, the NBA, MLB, and the NFL. They make sure that players will be paid enough for the time to arise again or strike in a new CBA agreement, that these players will be able to cover themselves and cover their families. However, I noticed that with the film industry, it's not the same. And with the Screen Actors Guild, the union for them, and the Writers Guild, their union, I realized that the negotiations are not as good, and I feel like they need to push harder when they do go through negotiations, and they have to say, look, we need you all to pay us this amount of money, and we need this X amount of money from our residuals as well. And we also need to make sure that we have enough money to cover ourselves if the time arises again where we have to go through a strike because you all don't want to pay us. And
I
that's just
think that
something
is a
I've
part of
noticed about the film industry.
negotiations. I think that is part of negotiations, but I feel like it's executives or representatives who are unwilling. A lot of people have been talking about Bob Iger, who is the CEO of Disney, who was supposed to make his exit next year, who came out of retirement to save the last Bob from failing for Disney. Um, he was supposed to make his exit next year because he said that I really did not want to come out of retirement because of the strikes. It said that he's going to stay in charge until at least 2026. He called the strike a terrible thing. Disney, who is also a major studio and has been almost like the premier major studio for at least 80 years. Um, it's things like that. Me and my mom had a conversation about it today. Um, and I was like, what happened in the negotiations when you went on strike for teachers? Since she's no longer a teacher, and when teachers go on strike, she can no longer strike with them. She goes, well, the UTLA union reps, they meet with teachers, and then they go back and then they meet with the school board, and then things sort of go from there. And she was like, the difference is when we go on strike, we don't show up to work. We don't do lesson plans. We don't do schoolwork. And yes, it lets kids fall behind, but it really puts pressure on the school board because parents then have to put pressure on the school board. I guess in this case, the reps are putting pressure, and then striking is obviously causing them to lose large amounts of money and having to fire people. She said the true difference will honestly be if they pay them back. And I said, what do you mean by that? Because this is about underpaying. She said when teachers go on strike, most of the time, at least in LAUSD, they are required to pay us back for the time that we have spent out because we have to go back and do extra work to make sure that children catch up to the deadlines that LAUSD has set for them to meet as a requirement for them to advance to the next grade. Which I found interesting. I didn't know that. I don't think that's going to happen. At least, I just don't think that's going to happen. Speaking of things that are not happening, the Emmys. The Emmys have added themselves to that list. So the Emmys are still slated to air September 18th. However, with the actors and writers on strike, and appearing at award shows is one of the things that the actors cannot do while they're on strike. I think it's going to be moved. They were already talking about moving it due to the writer's strike, and I think both of them being on strike, it'll be moved again, because if you have an award show with no stars, like we discussed in the BET video, no one's gonna watch. Because who wants to hear, we'll be sending this to their homes? We don't care. We don't.
But then also, on top of that, if you have no award show with somebody to write scripts and good jokes,
Correct.
it's another thing that will put me to sleep for sure. I'm pretty sure it'll put other people in America to sleep as well.
I think everybody saw Ariana DeBose do the Tony Awards and thought it was possible. But Ariana DeBose is a trained theatrical dancer and actor. Like, she is trained in being able to carry, adapt, and improv through a show for 2-3 hours. The Tony Awards were for almost right under 5 hours. And there were multiple times in the show where she was like, whoever comes on stage comes on stage.
Yeah.
I think it's totally unrealistic for people to ask other people to do the same thing. So Fox News has the rights. Fox Company has the rights to the Emmy Awards. They want it to air in January. The Academy is aiming for November because they still want it to be in the 2023 season. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think January is a lot more realistic.
I would like to say it's gonna happen because that means more than likely these people have been paid.
Yeah.
And the earlier, the better.
That's very true.
But realistically, with what I've heard today about the companies not really wanting to do an agreement with either of the unions, realistically, I'm also thinking the Emmys will be in the 2024 year.
Even if they do in negotiations by, say, September, October, I think planning an award show and asking people to be there fresh off a strike is still going to be a lot because you're talking about artists paying for stylists and, hair and makeup, which some artists probably could afford, but not all of them. Like, even to bring up, even the pay discrepancy between Zendaya on Euphoria and, Sydney Sweeney. Not to say that Zendaya isn't the caliber of artist that deserves to be paid that much, but Sydney Sweeney was like, yeah, they gave us this much for an episode, but there's taxes, and then there's press, and then there's awards, and then we have to be styled, and we have to be presentable. We pay a lot more. That's things that I keep in the back of my mind. The TV Academy chairman, Frank Schwarma, announced the award nominations alongside Yvette Nicole Brown, and he started the live stream with a sort of word of hope, saying, "We hope that the ongoing guild negotiations can come to an equitable and swift agreement." Equitable being the most important word in that sentence. Equitable also being sort of hypocritical in a sense, because here is the tea. Succession made history with not even their 27 nominations, which they're the most nominated show this season. They made history with the fact that never before has 3 actors been nominated in the same category. They had 3 actors nominated for lead actor in a drama series. And a lot of the writers took a stop from their picket lines to point out the fact that a lot of shows had been overlooked. A lot of shows that were eligible for this season had been overlooked. So that shows like Succession, White Lotus, Ted Lasso could rack up 27 nominations, 23 nominations, 21 nominations. Last of Us got 24 nominations. I personally, well, obviously, actors, voters, even people don't have time to watch like all the shows that are being nominated in like a single award season. But we're talking about essentially 5 or 6 shows being nominated this award season, when at least 20 shows were eligible. So a lot of people pointed out Snowfall and their final season was not on this list of nominations, even though high praise of the cast of Snowfall.
Hold on, because I've never watched Snowfall. I'm sorry, but I've never watched Snowfall. But I honestly can see how good that show is. Like, I want to watch it so bad. And the fact that my homie, how you pronounce his name? Damson Idris. That's how you pronounce it. The fact my homie did not get any nominations is ridiculous. Like,
the finale of the show really, really speaks to like the strength, the importance of having a strong writer's room, because of the shock that fell over social media when the show ended. I'm not gonna spoil it since you want to watch it. Okay. Well, I mean, like, the fact that people really thought that he was gonna be living like some kind of like kingpin life, when really he's just an old man with a cane living in his one-story house. The one-story house that's around the corner. And somebody very much like his character is probably living in it right now. It really speaks to the strong writing and like having a strong cast to support her strong writing. You would think it would be nominated. P-Valley, who has been heavily nominated among a lot of other award shows and has such a heavy media presence right now. Not nominated. Bel Air, not nominated in the same way. Queen Charlotte. Actually, in a surprising twist, since Bridgerton was so heavily nominated, was also eligible for this award season, and Queen Charlotte was not nominated either. Some also pointed out the Best Man Holiday. I happen to like the Best Man Holiday personally. I could understand why the demographic of voters wouldn't not only watch the Best Man Holiday, but not vote the Best Man Holiday. I think Bel Air.
Demographic of voters watch P-Valley either, like at all. Like, there's
absolutely
no way
not.
They watch P-Valley.
Absolutely not. But I would definitely expect them to watch Queen Charlotte.
Of course, I think they did watch Queen Charlotte, and forgive my take here, but I feel like they just got too much of Bridgerton from it and too much of the explicit that is also in Bridgerton as well. So I feel like maybe they got tired of the formula that was being used. Maybe
it's the same formula that's kept Grey's Anatomy on television screens for this long. It's all
Grey's Anatomy is a money grab at this point. They don't make that show for
Grey's Anatomy is the same show. Like it's
a money grab.
Honestly, I love Shonda Rhimes down. I love her down. If you look at any of her shows, it is the same thing. A group of people who sleep with each other in a different, really high stake work setting.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ka-ching.
I'm just saying. So Yellowstone was sort of the darling of the Emmys last year. Yellowstone's racked up a lot of nominations last year. Kevin Costner, who leads that cast, who's also a pretty high-profile actor, he was not nominated this year, and that was a shock for a lot of people. The prequel to Yellowstone, 1922, which has the heavy hitter of Helen Mirren, was not nominated whatsoever. I will preface these nominations by saying it is, again, up to major studios to put nominations out and push forth both actors, writers, ensembles, costume designers, set designers into award shows. A lot of people said if actors are going on strike, we are not going to keep pushing forward and paying for award shows in the way that we do. That's a whole separate. We're not even gonna touch that. So I will say that sort of is on the company for doing that, but it's also very noticeable. The company has to put an actor forward and the voters still have to vote. So if a company puts an actor forward and the voters do not vote for that actor's still not making it. So I will say that Selena Gomez and Martin Freeman were not nominated. They were heavily nominated last year for Only Murderers in the Building from Hulu, but their co-star Martin Short made the list this year. And then a lot of writers specifically complained that a lot of the shows in the drama category, in the comedy category, did not give comedy. They gave drama. So comedy had shows like Ted Lasso and Barry, which I think are, I guess funny. They're not my kind of funny, but I guess they're funny. But it also had shows like The Bear and Shrinking.
I've never heard of Shrinking.
Shrinking is about abuse, substance abuse. And The Bear.
Comedy category?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And The Bear, which everybody has been raving about, another show with a strong writing room and a strong cast. Jeremy Allen White, who was also in Shameless, has a breakdown every episode. It's about him, building these relationships in his kitchen, learning more about his craft, and then ultimately starting his own restaurant, or trying to start his own restaurant.
You know what? I feel like I could be very wrong here. I don't know much about these topics. However, I'll say that I feel like in the categories that these shows actually belonged in, those spots were already filled. Like you couldn't put any more nominations within those spots. Therefore, they needed to make room for these good shows, and like they couldn't just leave them out, so they had to put them in other categories. Like with The Bear, you find a few funny jokes. Oh yeah, this is a comedy, by the way. We can specify this as a comedy. We can categorize it as a comedy. That's what I meant to say. So we're going to put it in the comedy section.
So for the Emmys, at least, because there's a different limit on each different award show, there's 8 nomination slots. For supporting actors in a drama series, most of them, all of them, are Caucasian men from either White Lotus or Succession.
Wait, like just those 2 shows? Like that's what you mean?
Yes, correct. Yes. Speaking of, if Pedro Pascal had not picked up his first Emmy nomination with The Last of Us, lead actor in a drama series would also be dominated by Caucasian males. Let's talk about that for a moment. Pedro Pascal and Jenna Ortega both picked up their first Emmy nominations for lead actor and actress in a drama series. Pedro Pascal for Last of Us, Jenna Ortega for Wednesday. They're both only the second people of Latin descent to be nominated in both of those categories in the 75-year history of the TV Academy Awards.
Now, what does that say about them?
I think it reinforces the point that we made earlier about the lack of diversity in the voters' screen. In fact, the first person of Latin descent to win lead actress, be nominated for lead actress in a drama or comedy series is currently in Barbie, America Ferrera. Which I'm excited for. Again, I don't know if you could tell, because I'm a Barbie girl.
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
Copyrights. Um, Staying with, actually, speaking of The Last of Us, um, The Last of Us that traumatized me so deeply and made me cry every week. Kevion Montreux Woodward, who plays Sam in Last of Us, is nominated for Best Guest Actor in a Drama Series. And it makes him the youngest person ever nominated for this award. He's only 10 years old. It also makes him the first deaf and hard of hearing person to be nominated for this award.
Man, let me tell you something about my boy. Bro, I don't know the last time I cried or nearly cried at a TV show.
No, honestly, he's good.
Like, yo, honestly, I think the last time I cried was like the finale of Sweet Life on Deck.
Are you serious?
Anyway, yo, he was like, yeah, he was real. That was crazy. That was a great performance.
Sweet Life on Deck?
Yo, we talking about the Emmys right now.
I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that. I was like, I don't know what I thought. I was like expecting like Interstellar or like Endgame. Even I would have took Endgame. Sweet Life is Zach and Cody.
Yo, come on.
He's 10 years old right now, though, which means he probably would have been 7, 8, or 9 when they were actually going through casting and then through filming and then through post-production. So I really award him because I think, truthfully, without that episode, we never get Ellie's hero journey. And I truthfully was not all right for like a couple of days. Like, I was hurt for a couple of days. Like, didn't even really want to watch the next episode. Like, hurt.
Yeah, I don't think we did watch the next episode. I think it took us a few more days to watch that next episode.
We have a lot of watch parties. Same way we have a lot of video parties where we talk about the things we have watch parties about. So Dominique Fishback also picked up her first nomination for Swarm, which was also a media favorite this year. A horror depiction from the mind of Donald Glover about Beyonce fans. Right before Beyonce goes on tour. Well, she kicked off Philadelphia yesterday, so the Queen is officially back in the United States.
The Queen. She's showing her bias. You don't do that as a journalist.
I'm an alien superstar.
I like Beyonce. She is
I'm an alien superstar.
Category.
James Marsden and Jury Duty are actually the surprise of this Emmy series. So let me break down the show for you really quick. They hired a guy for Craigslist, told him that he would be doing a documentary, they'd be following him around with cameras, and that he would be doing jury duty. So basically they put up the cameras, they had him there, they set him down, and then James Marsden walks in and he's like, "Are y'all seeing this right now?" And they're like, "What's wrong?" And they're like, "This dude's an actor." And they're like, "No, he's not." And then they proceed to do a Truman Show-esque sort of controlled chaos.
Oh, I was like, what is jury? But I know exactly what you're talking about. Yo, that show was mad funny. Okay.
From Freevee, actually, which is another surprise because it's considered one of the lesser streaming sites like Freevee, Tubi, so they were surprised that this was actually voted in. But the more and more that I watch, what's actually going on in the show and the way that the show was actually put together, I'm surprised it's not nominated more. One, because it takes a lot of work to completely convince a guy that the actor who made himself famous from Enchanted and Hairspray and several stage engagements, that he is not sitting right beside you when he's very clearly sitting right beside you. I think that cast did a phenomenal job, and I think they should have been nominated for. That's my take on The Yard. That's my last take on The Yard as I wrap up the review of the Emmy and the strike. It's my take of the review. You see what I did there?
Yeah. Here's my take of the review.
Yeah.
See what I did there. P-Valley should have been nominated. Snowfall should have been nominated. Bel Air, I never watched it, but seeing that the fan feedback on the show, should have been nominated.
Bel Air is actually really good.
Pedro
I put it
Pascal,
off for so long.
Pedro Pascal should not be the only person of color in his category. Same with Jenna Ortega. White Lotus and Succession are not the only shows that are out. That's my take on the review.
I feel like that wraps it. We've reviewed it. I should start ending like that. We've reviewed it. That's cute. I like that. We've reviewed it. Thank you for joining us today.
If y'all didn't watch my show, I was struggling with my outro. She just got her outro. See, she's creative. I'm not. Anyway.
I'm in entertainment. You're in sports. It's my job. We reviewed it. Godspeed to all of the actors and writers. Everyone who's been furloughed in the actors and writers strike, as well as all the businesses in LA that are going through pandemic-like struggles right now because of the lack of entertainment industry. We see you. We're praying for you, and, you know, we'll join you soon. Professionally, officially. Until next time.